Ever wanted to get up close and personal with Blood Red? Well, here's your chance. Blood Red is heading back out on the road next Wednesday, the 24th of November, to Dublin, as Paul Gorst and Josh Williams from Analysing Anfield bring you a special live episode ahead of the Reds Champions League game with Porto. Tickets are available at bloodred.ie at €10 each. Do move quickly though, as tickets are extremely limited. Follow the link in the description or head to bloodred.ie to join us out in Dublin at the Camden for Blood Red Live. Well, Guy Clarke here. Welcome along to Blood Red and the latest episode in the bottom line as we look at Liverpool from a financial perspective. Here to add the insight and expertise, we have our business of football writer, Dave Powell, as we'll be talking through FSG's latest purchase. No, it isn't a Gini Wijnaldum replacement. Dave, thanks for joining us, though. And interesting developments regarding FSG in the last couple of days.
Yeah, they've been looking for ever since March when Redbird Capital came on as 11% partners through that $750 million investment. They've been looking for other sporting properties. They looked into esports. They looked at European football, looked at the NBA. The NFL was always too cost prohibitive because of the valuations of the teams. They're all being, pushing on. They're already have a massively high watermark. So they already expressed an interest in the NHL. The Boston Red Sox president, Sam Kennedy, who's also a partner of FSG, he said it was a market they were looking into. And yeah, it looks like reports in the US on Tuesday evening suggested it was close to sealing a deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm led to believe that it is correct, and it's something which is moving forward. FSG or Redbird aren't going to comment publicly on that until it's concluded, but it seems like it's a deal which is going to go ahead, which would make the Pittsburgh Penguins the fourth sporting team in the FSG empire. And there's more to come. I'm led to believe in the future as well. So it's a big deal for FSG. The Penguins will become a fairly substantial part of their empire, taking the whole value of the business to probably past the 8 billion mark. So yeah, it's another move, and it's been a year of major moves really for FSG. They've, after the past decade or so, has been focusing on business building, whether it be with the Red Sox or Liverpool, which has been evidenced through the revenues of 180 odd million when they took over in 2010, and now before the pandemic they'd reached 533, so there's a huge rise there of 300 odd million. So it's the next phase, and they've talked about it being FSG 3.0, is building the business and the empire really. So and I think the Penguins are going to be the next part of that, but there's going to be more to follow.
Yeah, first two questions kind of to come with. Who are the Pittsburgh Penguins, for those who aren't aware? I'd say I'm one of those. And why? What impact does this have for FSG? And I mean, selfishly from the Liverpool perspective, what impact is this going to have on Liverpool?
I'll answer the first question. They're a kind of storied ice hockey franchise in the States. They've the most glittering prize in ice hockey is the Stanley Cup, and they've won that twice in the past 5 years. So it's kind of a similar backstory as opposed to what they had in Boston. So it's a working class town with a real sense of identity, where the team is a very important part of the community. In Pittsburgh, I mean, they already have the Steelers, like Boston do with the Bruins and the Celtics. So it's a city which is passionate about sport. It's also the most followed NHL side on social media sites like Instagram. It has the 11th highest valuation. So from an FSG standpoint, the value comes in somewhere, I'm led to believe, around $845 million. The business is valued at. So that's about 638 million pounds. But they are a business which has, just like all NHL teams, are coming into this on the back of having just secured record-breaking media rights, which is what underpins most of investment from US investors into sport is the strength of the media rights. And they've just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal over the next 7 years with a few months ago with Turner Sports and ESPN. So there's a lot of strength there and a lot of value and future growth which they can tap into. They are a strong business already. Their annual revenues are higher than some of those of the teams above them who have higher valuations. So there's a lot there for them to work with. I think they'll see some similarity between what they've done at Boston. From a Liverpool standpoint, I mean, everything comes back to how does this impact Liverpool. Ultimately, all FSG's business entities, the sporting entities, are supposed to operate within their own kind of ecosystem. They generate their own funds, which then get funneled back into their own businesses. But the strength of the group allows, and if more profits are coming throughout the group, it means that FSG are in a strong position to bring on board new capital for various projects, whether that's infrastructure related to, which we've seen it through the Anfield Road development, the main stand, all that. While we may not see it initially, it's kind of a drip fed effect which goes to helping revenues increase throughout the business. So yeah, it strengthens FSG's hand, and that in turn means they'll be able to generate more capital, and spend more on that round of the business on infrastructure, which would then in turn turns into money for the playing budget. So yeah, it's kind of a fairly long-winded way of going around that, but it's that they're not, we're not dealing with owners that are like Man City or are just going to dip into the pocket. These are businesses, these are billion-pound businesses that they have built up, and they invest. They spend what they earn, really.
Yeah, it's kind of strength in numbers, isn't it? Of having these organisations, the more of them you have, the more capital you're able to kind of attract and bring on board. And obviously, Jerry Cardinale has been a big part of that. And I remember when we spoke, I think it was Easter, summertime, of speculating over the fact that there were these moves being made. As you said right at the top, this isn't something kind of that's been rushed into. It's a calculated business decision that FSG have made. And I kind of, with the Liverpool kind of swing in mind of thinking the impact for Liverpool, it's quite interesting and fascinating. I find kind of the way which FSG are building this sporting empire of clubs, of effectively going for clubs of similar stature, similar kind of caliber, of feeling what they can potentially get to, of being market leaders, as opposed to, you mentioned Man City before, they've obviously got the City Football Group, which is all within football, isn't it? But this approach of actually having kind of big teams within each kind of sporting entity that they are within is quite an interesting model that FSG are going for, and it seems to be quite powerful too.
Yeah, and they're all in markets with strong media rights, which helps, because the one thing that, while US investors love the lucrative nature of what the Premier League is, that's why they're so Liverpool has become their centerpiece. I know we talk about often, it's always mentioned about Boston being all where the focus lies. I mean, ultimately Liverpool are the most valuable asset that they have. They're the most marketable football club in the Premier League. According to the latest research, they are a business which has risen from when they purchased it from 300 million and days away from administration in 2010. They are a business which is worth 3 billion now. So that kind of business growth is seen there. Obviously, people want to see money spent on the on pitch product, but there's a lot that goes into. I think FSG are trying to see what we're trying to plan for what the next 10 years looks like in sport, because there's going to be a big change. I mean, the reliance on simply just things going up and up and up and revenues, etc., and things can't always go up and up. It's there has to be a point of you have to find value in other places. So the relationship with LeBron James is strengthened. They brought in Jerry Cardinale and Redbird Capital because their expertise lies in monetizing that space around content, so media rights and things like that. They've got the analytical approach will kind of sweep through everything they do, from Boston to Liverpool to if they do take, if the Penguins deal does come off, then the same type of thing will be employed there. But the LeBron James link up, they've brought, they've taken a slice of Spring Hill Entertainment, which is a kind of to breaking new ground in that kind of content space and digital storytelling. And it sounds all, like where's the value lie in this? But ultimately, what the plan is to try and make Liverpool and the rest of their sporting entities the biggest in their field. Obviously, a lot of that is predicated on the global size of the clubs anyway. So Liverpool already had a global appeal before that, but also on winning. So there has to be an element of winning underpinning everything that happens, which in recent years it has, to be fair. So I think all these things are starting to make sense now. So the strengthened relationship with LeBron, the Redbird Capital moves now into kind of taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and also don't be surprised to see an NBA team arrive under the wing in the not too distant future. I think that LeBron James eventually, when he hangs up his sneakers, will. He's already expressed some kind of interest in an element of team ownership. You wonder how, whether that might be the perfect kind of way into that kind of sphere for him. I mean, being part of FSG now, he kind of gets to see how the sausage is made and everything. I suppose he gets to see how it all comes together, how it works running a major sporting empire. Because he's a business magnate himself now. So, there's a lot of interesting moves going on. And while it's always not visible, maybe how all this links back to Liverpool, what it suggests to me is that the long-term plan for FSG very much involves Liverpool around all this, because there seems to be a number of things brought into play over the past 10 months or so, which kind of point to the long-term future being FSG, whether that's a succession plan for what comes next, or whether it's simply just that John Henry's intent on sticking around well into his 80s. I don't know, but I do think FSG in some way, shape, or form are here for the long term.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Is a lot of people look at this and what a £638 million deal that it is, 6 weeks away from the January transfer window opening, will think, oh, actually, there might be a bit short for cash if Jurgen Klopp does need a midfielder or a forward in the January transfer window. But it's a case of kind of the pots not getting mixed. And as you say, it is all really underpinned by the need for success. And if success is maybe going to be at threat at all, that is where I suppose the central arm of FSG will then step in to support whichever sporting entity it is, to ensure that they do maximise on-field success, which, as you say, underpins the need to be able to sell media rights and this, that, and the other globalization around the world of kind of making their money back.
Yeah, I mean, their ability to generate revenue through kind of leverage and success of Liverpool has been huge. But the two things can't, just because there's money kicking around to buy a sporting empire, that doesn't mean it's money that they would just simply pump into Liverpool to buy players, because it's there are separate pots for how they approach a business. Liverpool is a business in its own right, so it generates its own funds, and the strength of their ability to invest is predicated on their ability to qualify for the Champions League or their player trading model. This has been in situ for a long time now. It's not, I don't see it change in any way, shape, or form. I know it's not universally popular, and I think last year in January exposed the flaws of thinking that you can simply make do and mend, because while Nat Phillips and the likes did really well in helping Liverpool get dragged over the line, reality was that was a misstep. That was a potentially catastrophic decision not to invest properly, because they very nearly could have missed out on the Champions League. You're relying on your goalkeeper scoring from a corner and players that were nowhere near the first team at the start of the season coming in and playing their part. And you look at kind of the likes of Ozan Kabak now. I mean, he's in a team with like Norwich struggling at the bottom. So I think that was very much down to Klopp being able to drag his team over the line, as opposed to vindication of any FSG methods in January. But they will know that they can't continue to not spend that. Whether the January window is always difficult, because you are unable to attract the best players, because clubs are reluctant to let go of them, because they are in the middle of their own seasons. They're either fighting for honours. So if they're fighting for the Champions League, keeping a player that could get them in the Champions League is probably worth more to them than holding out to the end of the season for a transfer fee from elsewhere. Also, the pool of players is just, players aren't usually that keen to move mid-season. They've already got, especially if they've already got success that they're chasing, whether it's internationally or domestically. So all that comes into play. But the issue with Liverpool going to have is how AFCON makes everything look. And it's going to, and how that impacts the future. Obviously, the feeling will be that if the Salah deal gets done, that may feel like it's a boost, but ultimately they're going to be without him for a period of time anyway. So yeah, to kind of go back to the question, it's the two things aren't intertwined really. It's the strength of Liverpool's business is what props up their transfer spend. The strength of FSG on the whole allows them to invest in areas which and take on new properties because they are a business. I know it's very difficult as football fans to see footballs as businesses because we're emotionally attached to the product. But for business owners, and it's the same for anyone. I don't care whether it's FSG or whether it's the Glazers, whether it's PIF. This isn't. There's no. These businesses, these are, they all serve a purpose for one reason or another. I dare say the purpose that PIF have for Newcastle is very different from what FSG have for Liverpool. But the thing remains the same, that they can only spend what they earn, and with Premier League rules tightening and FFP regulations, as much as we don't like to think that they do anything, they are there, they exist. Liverpool can only spend what the business earns itself. So, but if they're able to invest in other areas, and that in turn means they can bring on board fresh capital, like I mentioned earlier, and they can invest in areas of infrastructure that ultimately aid Liverpool, such as Anfield Road, because that's going to push Liverpool's match day revenue close to the 100 million mark for the first time, and all that factors into being able to spend more in the transfer market. So there is a link between all these things, but perhaps the cash injection that some people would like to see to go into buy a striker or a midfielder, that doesn't play out perhaps as they want it.
It's more a secondary or tertiary kind of cash injection, isn't it? As you say, they pay for the Anfield Road development. That in turn boosts match day revenue. That in turn means maybe the wage bill can get higher and Mohamed Salah can get given a new contract, or maybe a few fringe players are sold on, and that helps free up wages as well. And on that, obviously we've not done a Bottom Line podcast for a few weeks now, but just wanted to kind of get your thoughts and kind of look back on the piece you wrote across the Echo regarding Michael Edwards and the seismic shift in FSG that's going to have, obviously him moving on, Julian Ward taking on the reign, and just kind of the job that Michael Edwards has managed to do. Kind of when you look at the figures written down, it's absolutely remarkable. The 27 players he's sold under his watch bring in just over £370 million, meaning the net spend through that time since the start of Edwards' tenure has been just shy of £161 million, and yet Liverpool see themselves where they are. It underpins the fact that FSG's business model is working.
Yeah, and I think the question remains for a lot of people is how long it that continues to work. Obviously, there's other teams that try and work around that model. But Liverpool have had great success. Michael Edwards has spearheaded that. But you can't underestimate what having Jurgen Klopp as a manager does. Does the same success happen with Brendan Rodgers or with someone else? I don't know. I don't think so. But his departure will be felt because he's done a lot of good work. But some of the deals that have been done the most transformational aspect of everything was because he took over from Ian Ayre in terms of taking on the kind of negotiation of transfers. So holding the feet to the fire of Barcelona, knowing that they were willing to pay that money for Coutinho, ultimately was the biggest business they've done, because it enabled transformational signings like Alisson Becker and Virgil van Dijk to come in, the two areas they needed to transform them from nearly men to achieving what everyone wanted them to. But I'm sure it'd be a smooth transition between him and Julian Ward. But the model will remain the same. Ultimately, Liverpool need to generate money and do their player trading model, because the wages keep on going up. I mean, while yes, the net spend has been the lowest among the top sides in the Premier League, and the transfer spend is limited. Wages have gone up, and then they've paid handsomely. They also pay agents. They've also paid agents a lot more than their rivals as well. So the money goes somewhere, So it's while they may have paid less in the transfer market in fees, they've certainly paid more in wages and to agents as well. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's ultimately they've still spent less than their rivals. But the difference being that they've worked smart, and the players they have, they've managed to build a team around a core group that stayed with the team for a long time. And the challenge for Julian Ward moving forward now will be to carry on that work that Michael Edwards has done, and find the next batch of players that can take on that mantle. Because we think we've spoken in the past about Salah's by the end of his next contract is going to be in his 30s. Van Dijk, Mane, Firmino, so all these players. Jordan Henderson's going to be end of his next contract 35, I think. So all these players, and these football is cyclical. So it's there has to be something following on and coming after what's been, and it's not like baseball, whereby or in American sports, sometimes you find that if there's teams or team owners will take a hit on a season, they'll tank a season if it means a rebuild when it comes to the draft picks for the following season. So and that's like accepted in American sport almost. There will be periods of highs and lows. Difficulty for FSG is that lows aren't expected now, because the high watermark's been reached, and that expectation kind of continues that you're there now, so you should be investing in staying there, as opposed to investing in the next period of success that might come further on down the line. It's finding that fine balance between sustained and sustainable success. Because the two things are very different.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure the feeling towards FSG when that January transfer window does open, and we'll see what does happen, unless, of course, it's all underpinned itself with a shiny new contract for a certain Mohamed Salah. That's all we've got time for here, though, on this edition of The Bottom Line. Dave, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Guy. Enjoyed that.
Well, that's all we've time for. Until next time here on Blood Red, it's bye for now.